Hey, everybody, and welcome to your Daily Detroit on an icy cold Tuesday, January 16th, 2024. Everyone, friends, our schedule's a little messed up with our orders because of the snow and everything else. So I'm Jer Stays, and on the line with me is our old friend, Norris Howard. How are you, sir?
What's going on, man, as we are continually locked here in the midst of the frozen tundra, the bombogenesis, the polar vortex, whatever you want to call it. But you know what? I like that this is a return to form for the Michigan winter because I feel like we've been spoiled the past few winters. And I like to call it lake effect snow with a vengeance. That's what this has been the past few days.
Now that we're into it, I'm kind of glad. And you know what? The person likes the outdoors in me is like, we need some of this cold so we can freeze out those bugs so it's not crazy in the spring. Norris, I know we're going to hit a few different topics today, especially considering we are post the Iowa primary. And no, we're not going to talk a ton about Iowa, but there are things with Michigan that we're going to get into because I think there are some trends we need to address for this next election cycle. But before we get into it, Norris, I know that you're not the biggest football guy, but I know your family is. So I wanted to, in the light of everything, I wanted to check in. How is your dad doing?
He's over the friggin' moon, man. Like, my dad is a firm, like, I don't text person. And literally, I just was hit with a deluge of texts, like, on Sunday evening of just like, see, I told you, Super Bowl. I actually got a text that just says Super Bowl, all caps with like 40 L's. and you know, at the end of the day, listen, I know what the team means to the city. I know how exciting it is. I mean, the nature of the win itself was dramatic, and the game was at least the first half of the game was fantastic. And I'll just say this, you know, if I have a running bet with my dad that if the Lions make it to the Super Bowl, I have to buy and wear like an entire Lions outfit and like come to his Super Bowl party if he can't make it to the game. And, you know, I'm here for it. I think that's in good spirits. And, you know, I think it's fantastic for the city. And I think Campbell and the rest of the team have done fantastic. I never thought I'd see them even be this good in my lifetime. So hopefully they can keep it going.
Can we get a picture of you in that, if that happens?
If it happens. And I will go all out because I'm a man of my word. And, you know, if it happens, I will go all out.
Let's get into the story we want to talk about. And yeah, we're going to talk about the auto show a little bit at the tail end. But we are the day after the Iowa caucuses. It's pretty clear. I mean, I'm sure some outside of events could theoretically happen, but Donald Trump is going to become the GOP nominee most likely. Let's just be realistic about this. And there is a lot of tension in the Michigan Republican Party that's been going on that we really haven't mentioned. I know we've gotten some listeners who've asked about it. And since we're a news and politics podcast, we do go there sometimes. And this is turning into like a tit for tat of competing votes. Supporters of Christina Karamo decide to keep her as a chair of the Michigan Republican Party, but that's her supporters. Another vote with another group of Republicans voted her out overwhelmingly. Karamo's supporters then went ahead and, like, as part of this, banned some of the most vocal opponents of Karamo from the party for 5 years. This is going back and forth. This is amid issues with finances, organization, the fact that, frankly, Donald Trump is gathering up all the money for Republican races and kind of running things where, you know, the Republican Party just doesn't have the oomph that it used to have. And this also is in the shadow, and I wanted to put this out there too, of a poll that came out in December showing that nearly 20% of African Americans want a choice other than Trump or Biden. And I'll start here with, I feel like that's a strong feeling from a lot of people, not just African Americans, but that was the poll that was sent over to me, and I wanted to just use that as a data point to get started with. But first off, if this is the case, does the Republican Party even truly exist beyond Trump anymore?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I feel like, first of all, I think to the point of the GOP, I think there's a very serious question they need to ask themselves as an institution. And what I mean by that is we clearly see that any alternative will be rejected. Any alternative to Trumpism, any alternative, and I'm not necessarily even saying that the alternative has to be anti-Trump. It could be Trump adjacent, but even the Trump adjacent nominees have been all but ostracized nationwide for the most part. And, I think here in Michigan, there is a specific brand of Trump GOPers that have drawn the line in the sand. I think what's happening with Karamo is that you have a lot of these sort of Grand Rapids conservative, West Michigan conservatives that are very much so more in the line of your traditional GOP type people, the Meyer family and the DeVosses and so on and so forth. And they are clashing with the populist movement. And the thing that makes this so, I think, worrying, and I'm saying this as somebody just looking at it academically, not putting my, political feelings into it, is that is a massive problem for the political future of the entire country. If we are boiling one entire side of our political discourse, which is already, in my opinion, a problem with having just two parties, but that's another discussion, is if we're ideologically boiling the GOP down to one man, that is a massive issue. And I think people need to really pull back. And I'm saying this even to people who may support Trump. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I think let's pull back for a second and say, if your entire ideology is wrapped up in one man, what happens when that man either disappears, he dies, he is, which is a possibility, potentially locked up or barred from being able to run? Your entire platform falls apart. And that's a problem, because I don't necessarily want, liberalism and leftism to be unchecked. That's the point of having political discourse, is that we should have a balance of power. We should have people who have different ideas being able to talk to one another and come up with a measured solution. But instead, what we have is a party that is chosen to ally themselves with one man. And when that man and his ilk don't win, you don't win anything. And that's what we've seen across the board. And I think, to your point about the study about African Americans, is that I think right now we have a Sophie's choice for a lot of people that feel that they have a Sophie's choice, in the sense of there's not really a candidate that makes you feel like we won. There's not a candidate that makes you feel like the country is moving forward in the correct direction. And listen, we can talk all day long about Joe Biden's age and his decisions in terms of what's happening in Israel and Palestine and all those kinds of things. But the legislation that he has supported has been overwhelmingly some of the most progressive legislation that we've ever seen. And I think we do ourselves a disservice to not acknowledge that the man is quite staunchly liberal. So if you're talking about who's going to get a liberal agenda pushed and executed on, then yes, that is who you vote for. The second part about that is everybody wants this new leader, this new representation, but who are they? Where are they?
I don't know about you. This is a blanket generalization, which I'm going to get in trouble for, but I have found that people who are passionate about an issue remember. And especially when it comes to women's rights, I think this idea that women are going to forget, or people passionate about women's rights are going to forget, is a bunch of hogwash. I think that this is a generational difference here, where even people on the right were like, yeah, no, you looked at Ohio and enshrined protections for women's rights. I think that that's something, and I think that Trump actually knows that. I think that's part of why you don't see him at the front of this, because he knows that's a losing issue for him. We are in for a really wild ride right now. I think a lot of people are worried about what's going to happen. I also wonder, too, how much of this is driven by a media cycle where you can make accomplishments, but I feel like facts don't matter anymore. And I hate to say that because we work around journalism, Norris, but enforced. And it's really frustrating from a, like, I actually do care about the facts and trying to be like, okay, what actually happened on the ground? And if people don't want to hear it, they don't care and they turn it off. And that's just unfortunately seems to be the truth.
Yeah, it is the truth. And I was having this discussion with a friend of mine not too long ago, is that like we got to be honest when it comes to our discourse, right? For as much as I may personally disagree with Trump, guess what? Operation Warp Speed may have saved the damn world during COVID. Let's just be honest. It was a good decision and pushed it through. Period. That's all that matters. Right. So, you have to be honest about certain things. Right. And if I was the GOP, I would be standing on that. But because they've allowed the conversation around COVID and around vaccines to be so muddied, a feather in their cap, they could be sitting back saying we literally saved the world. And you can't stand on it because you've muddied the conversation up about vaccines so much.
But they wouldn't be in power if it wasn't muddied, because that group of people honestly holds that belief, Norris.
And that's my point. And that's what I mean, is that because it's so tied up to a man and it's so tied up into quote unquote alternative facts. You remember when that was a popular phrase, right? Is that you can't even get to a consensus. You can't even get to an agreed truth. And that is always going to be an issue. And in the same vein, I'm starting to see, at least from the left, that there are some agreements on fact. We can disagree about tactic. We can disagree about decisions, but fact is true. And I think that's a thing that you're beginning to see the left gain a lot of steam on. And another thing that I want to say, which is a huge elephant in the room that we also don't want to talk about, but that has had major ramifications, is the fact that in the state of Michigan, we've outlawed gerrymandering, and the districts have been redrawn to be more accurately represented. And I think now that we see that same movement happening across the U.S., I would be interested to see what actually happens in this presidential election, because I feel like in the past, people have had issues. Clearly, they've had issues with how their votes went. And I think if states like Michigan and other states, this will be the first time we've seen it with the redrawn maps. I'd be interested to see in more purple states or left-leaning states or moderate states to see actually how he performs. Trump, to see actually how Trump performs, because I think with these new districts, there may be it may be very different than what we saw in 2020.
And you're talking about coattails here because, of the different House districts and the state House and all that. I know that there's a lawsuit currently underway, and there's a lot of misinformation around that lawsuit about what it's actually standing on as far as those districts go. And I want to get an expert in here to talk about it because I think it's very interesting. Is the GOP, as we knew it, dead?
I think for the foreseeable future, yeah.
Not saying it's going to be a cakewalk for Democrats.
I think to your question, is the GOP as we've known it previously dead? Yes. I think when you have candidates like Nikki Haley who can, can't even crack 30%. You have candidates like Ron DeSantis who technically should be far and away the nominee because of what he's been able to do in Florida.
He's just presenting himself as Trump light, and what people actually want, if Trump's running, people want Trump.
Well, but the thing about Ron DeSantis is that all the things that Trump and all the rest of his ilk have been able to, or have been touting that they want to get done, he's actually done in Florida. Like, that's the thing, is that he's actually been able to accomplish a lot of the things that people have been talking about or wanting to do nationwide. They just don't like him. And based off results, which is, I think, should be a big, factor in voting for somebody, he should be the candidate. Nikki Haley, based on her results, should be a strong candidate. But because that almost doesn't matter anymore, because the rhetoric now is more important than the result, and both parties suffer from this, but since the rhetoric is now more important than the results, those candidates don't matter. And that should be a major indicator as to where this party is, and it's not a good sign moving forward. I think it is dead. I think until Donald Trump moves to the side or is cast away or something happens to him, this is what it is. This is what conservatism is in the 21st century.
What is behind the growing appeal, in your view personally, of conservatism and African Americans, but it's a more of a, hey, maybe I'll look at this guy, or hey, I'll think about this, as opposed to before.
So I got two answers. One is a logical answer, which is, if you look at the numbers, the African American community is only somewhat progressive. It's a more moderate community than people give it credit for. It's not a hyper leftist community. It never has been, which is part of the reason why the African American community, especially older African Americans, supported Joe Biden so staunchly in the first place. I think that's a misnomer. I think everybody thinks that the African American community is this sort of hyper progressive sect, and it's not. So that's the one misconception that we have to sort of get rid of. But I think, honestly, and this is a more hot take, and I think some people are going to be very angry at me when I say this, is I think Black men are a bit afraid of losing some of the power that they have gained over the past 25 years. I think they feel like they've made great strides, and they're sort of being pushed to the side by Black women. Black women are the highest education attainment cohort over the past 20 years in the country. More Black women per capita are attaining degrees and getting post-secondary education more than anybody else in the country. They're starting more businesses than anybody else in the country. And so there's a lot of economic and educational power going towards the Black woman in America. And I think for a lot of insecure men, that is a scary prospect. And I think they don't want that to necessarily happen. I think there's still a very traditional streak that runs in many Black men that makes them feel like they should be the ones in power and they should be the ones with the educational attainment. But that's just not what the number says. And so if you got more Black women who are more qualified to do the jobs, they're going to get the jobs. Not to say that there's not issues with that and double discrimination and all that, but I think that is also a part of it. And then, you know, if for all us online people, to be perfectly honest with you, we got to talk about, you know, the red pill stuff and the men going their own way movements and all these other types of things where, you know, young men are going online and getting, for lack of a better term, getting radicalized by groups and individuals that paint women and Black women and the LGBTQ movement as something to be feared, as an enemy, as something that you know, reduces your potential. So these are all factors as to why I think you're starting to see particularly Black men move in a more conservative direction. And, you know, I don't know how we reverse that if that is indeed the goal. But at the same time, I do think that those are some factors, contributing to that.
Doesn't that echo the angst in the white community as well?
It does. It does.
Because it seems very similar. What you're portraying here seems very similar to the, I hear you, I see you, you know, other people make fun of you and your culture, I'm going to stand up for you kind of thing.
It does. I think one of the main differences, however, is that, you know, while more women are gaining more voice through economic power and voting power, I think the simple fact of just what Black women are doing in the country economically, in terms of educational attainment, is pretty remarkable. I think that's a development that's happened a lot in the shadows and on the fringe, because I think the Black community is still very much so painted to be a specific way in the national conversation. But if you look at cities like Atlanta, you look at cities like DC, you look at Houston, you look at parts of New York, you look at even parts of Metro Detroit, if we want to talk about Southfield, Royal Oak Park, all those kinds of places, a lot of the conversation is dominated by Black women and is pushed forth by Black women, you know. So I think this is a major schism within the Black community that I think at a national level we may not necessarily be ready to talk about, but it's happening. And I think anybody who doesn't really notice that it's happening is not really paying attention. That's just in my opinion.
I will leave that ball there because I don't have anything to add on that.
And I appreciate that.
Before we go, I want to touch on the news since we last talked that the auto show is in fact going to January. We mentioned this a bit on the show, but Norris, you were really strong with your opinions about it. And the people, once this news came out, were very strong about it in two factions. One, a very nostalgic faction, saying, of course, we want the auto show to be back in January and all this other stuff. And then another going, it doesn't matter what it is or when it is. It's got to have reveals. It's got to have better products. And how are you feeling now that, yes, in fact, next year, there will not be an auto show in the fall this year. There will be an auto show in January in 2025.
Here's how I feel about it. It's a case of two things can be true, right? I think there is a nostalgia factor. I'm not necessarily that big on nostalgia, but there is a nostalgia factor that is with the winter and the auto show. And it does need to be grander. It does need to be bigger. I personally think that, the big three have to do more in order to gain relevance. I actually just read a piece earlier today saying that Hyundai is essentially going to offer in rebates the exact same amount of money that you would have got for the tax break for buying an EV. So for buying one of their EVs, you get a rebate that would equal the same amount of money as the tax rebate as you would have got for buying American made. And that just continues to be some of these factors. And by the way, those EVs are already cheaper. So they're not competing on the same level. And the thing that, one of the things that used to really get people excited about specifically the American car market is the auto show. And as it stands right now, it used to be almost every year, but at least every other year, you could name a car you were excited about to see on the street. That used to be commonplace. I don't even think you could do that anymore. I don't think you could walk up to the average, a Metro Detroiter and say, man, did you see that? Did you see that new Mustang concert? I don't know. I will say the Mach-E is probably the last thing that got people in the streets talking like, dang, bro, that's kind of sweet. Like, yeah, the EV's finally starting to look kind of nice. Since then, crickets. I haven't heard of anything. And obviously, the pandemic has a major part in that. But they got to get back to that. They got to get back to the wow factor. They got to get back to driving cars through panes of glass. They got to get back to the showmanship. They got to get back to showing off the cars of the future. I want to see cars that look like spaceships. I want to see cars that I can lay down in and they drive by itself. I want to see all those things, even if I never get a chance to buy them ever. That's not the point. I probably will never get a chance to buy a Ferrari 458 Italia, which is probably my favorite car of all time. But guess what? I had to see one and sit in one and hear one rev up so it can become my favorite car of all time. How many kids and how many people can say those things anymore?
Norris Howard, so good to talk to you.
Oh, it's always great to talk to you, Jer.
If you've got feedback, 313-789-3211. That's 313-789-3211 or dailydetroit@gmail.com. We push some envelopes here, Norris.
I mean, listen, these are serious conversations, and I think there are some serious things that we need to discuss. And at the end of the day, we all got to be honest about the situation that we're in, and I hope that folks aren't offended by anything I said, and I hope they'll be willing to engage with us and continue the conversation. So if you disagree with me, agree with me, I welcome the conversation because I would love to hear how people feel about it. And if you think I'm wrong, that's okay. But let's start the conversation and talk more to each other, because these echo chambers are not helping any of us.
Well, with that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around town.